This is Toby Eunice with the Gypsy's Kiss. Stick with me a couple of seconds and we'll do our first Fenn treasure radio show, for lack of a better way to describe it. So I had this unusual problem that I had to deal with. I was prepared emotionally and psychologically to kind of get through the search, get done with the search, and for all intents and purposes I am. I will not be looking for the treasure again. But there was another part of me that was excited about some of the technology that we've implemented to communicate, to do outbound communications. So let me do a couple of things here, make sure we're online, and that... because I haven't done this in a couple of weeks, actually. There we go. Welcome back at Gypsy's Kiss. Hey, we're back. Let's see. So, anyway, the point that I was trying to make here is that for the past 3 or 4 weeks, I've had a lot of time to think about what I want to do with my life. And Shelley and I are very nicely invested in building out our new channel. And like I said, we took a lot of the technologies and a lot of the strategies that we developed with the Gypsy's Kiss and moved them over to Lady in the Oracle. But there's a part of me that wanted to keep moving ahead with things on a channel that we've built over the past year and a half, that being a Gypsy's Kiss. We just went over 3,600 subscribers. And I think what those 3,600 subscribers expect is some form of content on a regular basis. And so part of what I did was I asked my son, Jason, to become involved, and as he can, he's in a very different situation from me. He's, raising a family, and he's got his job, and not a job, but his work in creating art. And so he's, in a sense, he doesn't have the amount of time that it takes to make this regular programming, but he has committed to occasionally producing a panel session, for example, or one of his own programs, and I've committed to helping him do that. So that's one thing. The second thing is, for those of you that have seen the picture, and for some of you that have been here, there's a bunch of technology sitting in front of me, and it seemed like kind of a, I don't want to say a sin, but a waste, not to put it to some kind of use. And as I said, we are going to put it to use, we have been putting it to use on our new channel, Lady and the Oracle. And it's working out very nicely. As a matter of fact, we've added a completely different component now where we can actually read the cards. As you know, the new channel is about tarot reading. We can read the cards using the apps that are provided on the various stores, the Android and the iOS store, the Apple store. So I was very excited about, moving it over. But at the same time, I felt like there are things that I want to connect to the Gypsy's Kiss community of Fenn treasure hunters. And I always felt like I could do that without necessarily being an active searcher. I mean, I felt like I've paid my dues when it comes to the searching. I've been out in the field 32 times. I've come up with a lot of theories. I've written over 500 blog posts on the subject. I've delivered, I say I, but I mean we, have delivered over 350 videos on the subject. So I feel like I've paid my dues. I feel like I've developed enough expertise, not that there isn't much more to be learned, that I could hold my own in any conversation about the search without necessarily having to go out and look for it. And honestly, if I were to go look for it, if I were to spend some time next summer going to look for it, I'd go back exactly to the same spot, the Rio de los Pinos. I'm pretty much convinced it's there. You're not going to be able to talk me out of it any more than I'm going to be able to talk you out of looking in your location. And so if somebody finds it there, so much the better. But I did want to stay in touch with the community of folks, like I said, are 3,600 plus subscribers now, and give them the opportunity to kind of share in the experiences that I have. So I'm going to do this at the moment. The plan is opening this up on Wednesday nights and Friday nights. On Wednesday night, I'll do it for an hour because I'm making a very similar commitment to Lady in the Oracle, where we're going to be doing something very similar on that channel to develop the channel. And then on Friday nights, I might extend it a little bit longer, maybe go from 1 hour to 2 hours. But I plan for the near future to continue to do this. Now, the only thing that might break that up is if Jason decides he wants to put together a panel, and we'll do the panels on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. So the panel will replace what I'm going to call the Fenn radio show, right? So here we are. Let me say hi to some of the folks in the room, see how you guys are doing. And I've got some questions. So I have a new number for you. It's 866-597-9901. You'll see it scrolling across the bottom every once in a while, the toll-free text or voice. And that line is, as of this moment, let me open it up. Actually, I won't open it up for calls yet because there's a couple of text questions that I have to read before we open it up, and I don't want to interrupt the responses to those questions because I know at least one of them is in the room tonight. So let me say hi to everybody that's in the room. There's William. Hey, William. Yo, how are you doing? Davio22. Where's my Davio22? Right there. There's my Davio22. K-Pro's in the room. The Raven's Nest. So Cindy Guess from the Who's Your Sisters, she and her sister Tammy Manis have put together their own YouTube channel, and I feel like we at least gave them some inspiration to do that, and it's a lot of fun. I've already watched a couple of their videos, and we've added it to our subscription list, so anything that new comes out. But I strongly recommend, as usual, it's a new YouTube channel that deals with issues related to Fenn. They've been out on several recons. They have lots of videos of their recons. They have lots of ideas that they brought up, and now they're making videos about it. So add the Who's Your Sisters to your list of Fenn YouTube subscriptions. Hey, Eric Schmidt, nice to see you this evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. And do I have one? I know what he asked for, though. J. Ra, wow, we haven't seen you in a while. Nice to see you back, too. By the way, well, let me go through this, and I'll tell you some stories. K-Pro has indeed been to the command center, and we have the photographs to prove it. And like I said, it would be a waste. It would be... I don't want to use the word sinful, but it would be a waste not to put all this technology to good use. Glenna Friedman, hi. Davio Dan K, hi. Don Davidson, thank you, Don. We love doing this channel. So thanks for joining us tonight. The weather in New Mexico down here in Albuquerque has been uneventful. They've experienced some bad weather up north, getting some snow. Santa Fe was had enough to call it covered with snow. Albuquerque, Shelley got a couple of up in her area, which is north and east of me, did get a couple of spritzes. She tried to take a picture of it, but it wasn't there. Here, all we've had down here in the valley, all we've had is sunshine, so I can't complain. It's been cool, but we haven't had anything worth speaking of. So 222 Narf, hey there. I don't know if Indulgence is in the room. Joel Lewicki, hey, how are you doing? Nice to see you again. Don Davidson, K-Pro, let's see. Sean Martinez. Sean Martinez in the room. Copper Dan's in the room. Hey, guys. Gary Sandberg, howdy. Joe S. So make sure you guys, Blue Mango, that's a new name. Haven't heard that before, from New Jersey. And Jungle Cruiser. Once you're, yeah, every time you try to get out, they pull you back in. Remember that line? What is that? From is that Goodfellas? Or The Godfather? One of those. Every time you go out, they pull you back in. So here I am. And I wanted to tell you the reason I sound funny is because I am just coming off the back end of a cold. I'm very good about getting my flu shots every year. They're provided, of course, by the VA. Thank you, VA. And I'm very good about not getting colds. I can't literally, no one I spoke to could remember the last time they had seen me with a cold. But here's what happened. A couple of weeks ago, I went out to visit my one-year-old granddaughter. It was actually her one-year birthday. And my daughter, Erica, whose daughter Everly is, just had a party that was closer to the size of a small wedding rather than a 1-year-old birthday party. And I didn't want to miss it, so I headed out to Boca Raton for a long weekend and visit. And I got there, and of course, she hadn't seen me. I hadn't connected with her since about, let's see, it would have been about 2 or 3 months after, about 2 months after she was born. So she didn't remember me. So it took a couple of days for her to get used to big grandpa guy being around and hugging mom and making lunches and stuff like that. But after about a day and a half, she got used to me and she started coming over to me. And I realized she was a little bit sick, so I was being cautious. You don't want to pick up a cold while you're traveling, especially since you have to travel back to New Mexico. Anyway, there was at some point in all of this that we started playing a little game. And the little game was she would point her finger at me and I would bite it. I wouldn't bite it with my teeth. I'd bite it with my lips. And then she'd pop it out and she'd giggle. And she probably did that over a 3-day period. I'm going to guess, I don't know, 100 times. It was a bunch of them. But whatever was on that little finger from that sick little baby girl, and she didn't look that sick. She was a little bit runny-nosed, but in very good spirits. She had a fever. I think the fever got up to around 99 one night when I was rocking her to sleep. But whatever was on that finger, I picked up. And I flew home without any problems. No sneezing, no coughing, no hacking. By Tuesday, I was starting to feel a scratch in my throat. By Wednesday, I had planned lunch with my 2 oldest children, Jason and Sean. And by Wednesday, I had the sore throat. And then it just dived. And it went from sore throat, and then the next day it added a cough, and then the next day it added just continuous sneezing and runny nose, et cetera, et cetera. So I was really sick, and the sickest I've been in a long time, because I haven't been sick in a long time. I don't get colds. I mean, that's all. I've been very good about not getting colds. But because I couldn't get further away from this beautiful grandbaby girl for any further than 5 feet, I picked up that cold and I brought it home with me. But what was even worse is Jason. I had dinner or lunch with Jason and Sean on Wednesday, and somewhere in the translation of him stealing fries from my plate, he managed to get the cold. So when I talked to him last night about doing a show tonight, he sounded like I did last Wednesday. So, but I'm coming off of it. As you can hear, I can at least hold a conversation without sounding too stuffy. I'm still kind of gravelly voiced, and I've got some water here that I'm going to have to keep taking while you guys, while we're doing this. So, okay. So anybody else come in the room that I missed? Blue Mango, Copper Dan, let's see, got everybody there. So you guys keep talking. So again, you can text me questions or leave a voicemail at the new number. It's 866-597-9901. And the reason is, before I decided to do this, I moved our other number over to Lady in the Oracle. And so I had to get a new number for this. And you'll see it scrolling by. Let me see. It just went by. So you'll see it scrolling by every once in a while here if you need to remember. Text a message. And then after I take a couple of these messages that somebody had already sent, I will, you know what? I look really dark on there, don't I? Hang on, give me a second. Somebody complained about this on our other show. Let me brighten this up just a tad here, because it does look kind of dark, doesn't it? Controls. Oh, exposure's off just a little bit. That's a little bit better. Okay, we'll see how it looks on the screen over here in just a minute as it transfers over. Okay, so again, if you have a question, you can text it. You can call in, and it'll go straight to voicemail right now. But in about 10 minutes or so, I'll open up the phone lines, and you can call in and say hi. And again, it's always difficult for me to keep the show going and keep an eye on the chat room. So if you do have a question and you do want that question answered, it would be good if you could just text it to me at the number that you see scrolling across the screen below. Okay, that's a little bit better. I guess, yeah, a little brighter. It's kind of a dark thing. I'm using the same old lights we always use. Same old lights. They're great lights. Okay, so let me get to the questions that are already on the phone. I haven't seen these yet because they both came in today and I was busy all day. Okay, so this is, okay, so a couple of things. Number one, if you do text a question in or leave a voicemail in, make sure you include at least your first name and maybe what state you're calling from. Oh, here we go. I'm going to turn off my mic here for just a sec so I can clear my throat. Okay. So yeah, use your first name and maybe because all I have is a phone number and I'm not going to share anybody's phone number on the screen. So this question, if you're in the room, maybe you recognize the question and you can send me another text telling me who you are and where you're from. Can a waypoint in the poem be destroyed with little effort that would inhibit further progress to the treasure chest? I think the qualifier in that particular question is whether it could be done with little effort. The implication being, should I worry about whether or not that somebody who's in the same search area as I am, and maybe a little further along in the discovery of their clues, might be destroying the clues behind them so that I can't get to the same place. I'm sure that's something that Fenn would have considered, and it strikes me as likely that the physical representations that he chose for each one of the clues would have the kind of longevity that would at least last, 10, 20, maybe even 100 years. Now, he has said in various forms, how am I going to quote him? This is not a Fenn quote. Fenn said it might be there, or the equivalent of. He didn't specifically say the treasure would be there in 1,000 years, or the hunt could last for 1,000 years, or whatever, but he said something about 1,000 years. Which means he had thought about it, so again, I'm not going to quote it because I don't have the exact citation. But the 1,000 years thing has kind of come up more than once. But in addition to that, he's got to know that in 1,000 years, considering the environmental, geological, ecological changes we're experiencing right now, I mean, scientists will tell you that we are in a period of dramatic change. And that dramatic change started about 200 years ago. In terms of geologic time, 200 years is nothing. So scientists expect that if we manage to survive this period, because we're in the process of eliminating ourselves from the planet, if we manage to survive this period, that we could go on. The question is, what is the Earth going to look like in 1,000 years? And so we know at a very minimum we are going to have experienced ecological changes. The rivers that once existed may not exist anymore, or they may be overflowing, depending, right? So we can be certain that we're going to experience ecological changes at a minimum. We can be certain that we're going to have experienced environmental changes at a minimum. We know that because those changes are already taking place. I need to turn my microphone down here just a tad so you guys don't get blown out. Because we're already experiencing those. We know there is a potential for geological changes because geological changes occur almost, I want to say daily, but are constantly occurring. The question is whether or not they're occurring in an area that matches where we're searching. So I would, in answer to your question, is it possible that some of the physical representations of the clues that Fenn placed in the poem could be destroyed with little effort? It depends on how you define a little effort. I don't think the little effort, or what you call, quote, little effort, unquote, could include being destroyed by another human being, by another person. But it wouldn't take much effort on behalf of Mother Nature from an ecological, environmental, or geological perspective, with little effort to make a change that might make those clues unrecognizable to an individual. And I think that's the problem with waiting 1,000 years for this treasure to be discovered, because at some point you're going to have to ask yourself, if I'm working with, if this is 2050 and I'm working with clues that were written in 2010 and translated, encoded, if you will, encrypted in 2010, and I'm looking for warm water's halt, how much could have changed between 2010 and 2050? So I don't think they have infinite longevity. I think they have a little bit of longevity, but I don't think you can predict that any more than you can predict environmental, geological, or ecological changes, or a small asteroid hitting in the area. I mean, there's too many variables that we don't have control of that would prevent me from saying that they can't change. I think they can change. Whether or not a human could change them in advance of your arrival, I don't think so. I think he probably thought about that. I'm sure he thought about the potential for ecological, environmental, geological, and astronomical changes as well. But he also knows that there's nothing he can do about that. He can't stop that from occurring. So what he could do is keep it from being changed by another individual. Okay? I hope that answers your question. Let's go back to the next one. And the next one. Oh. Is that from the same person? Oh, no. So this person is from New Mexico. He has a 505 area code like me. Didn't give me a name, but I can tell he's from New Mexico. At least he got his cell phone in New Mexico. And he says, Toby, I don't recall ever hearing you... Oh, man, this is going to be harder than I thought it was. I didn't think I was going to dry out this way. I don't recall ever hearing you state your opinion on the home of Brown. What is it? So that's an interesting question for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't know necessarily that I've ever stated it, because I think it would be so my perception of the home of Brown is probably going to be criticized as much as my perception of where warm water's halt is. But my criteria for the home of Brown was the same as my criteria for determining where warm water's halted. And that is, I had to have a reference, a citation of some sort, and then I had to have a geographically precise location. And in the case of our warm water salts, it's geographically precise to GPS, 6 decimal GPS positions. So, okay, so for those of you that showed up for this show tonight, I'm about to share with you some things that I don't recall ever sharing with anyone except my partner. But since we're not looking for the treasure at this point, I don't think it makes any difference. Oh, speaking of my partner, there she is. Hi, Shelley Carney. How are you doing? So I went through a variety, like everyone else in the search. I went through a variety of opinions about the brown, the color, the word brown in the poem. And at some point, our best conclusion, and we supported it because it was confirmation bias for our search in Lander, Wyoming, was that it had to do with lignite deposits, coal deposits, from which the color Van Dyke brown is derived from. And Van Dyke brown was a very popular color with Fenn's good friend Eric Sloan. They actually wrote about it Eric wrote about it in his book, and then Fenn wrote about it in his reference book to Sloan. So I was in that period for a while, but about in the summer before, so that would have been the summer of 2016. In the summer before, Shelley convinced me to restart Gypsy's Kiss on YouTube. I went back and I basically threw almost everything away that I had believed about the poem. And and restarted it, and went back and did what Fenn has always recommended. I read it not just dozens of times, I read it hundreds of times. I did what my son suggested, and I put it on a loop recording. And whenever I was doing something that didn't require that didn't require intellectual capacity, washing the dishes, I would plug it in and I would listen to the poem over and over again. At some point, I connected it to, so if you look at Fenn's life, you'll see that there are very important periods in Fenn's life. One is the period excuse me, I'll try to catch that when I can. What I'd call his childhood to young adult stage, before he entered the service, the period in which he entered the service, in which he not only became an adult, but a kind of filled out man for himself, who he really was. Then there's the period after he left the service in, 1972, and he became a business person. And not only became a business person, but took advantage of the fact that whatever little he knew about art, he was able to translate that into owning a gallery that eventually produced him great wealth. Through 1988. And then after 1988, he became a hobbyist of sorts. And what I mean by that is he took all the interests that he acquired over his life and he started practicing them. He found himself an ancient Native American pueblo in New Mexico that he could purchase from the Pueblo tribes and started excavating himself. So his passion for amateur archaeology and recovering Native American artifacts, ancient Native American artifacts, kind of folded into that experience. And of course, the result was a book, one of what I think of one of his best books, in The Secrets of San Lazaro. And so there was this period after he dealt with the diagnosis of cancer in 1988, where he realized he was never going to go back to gallery work, that he kind of focused on what I would call three areas. One was research and publishing. That is, he would research topics as if he were, still more than interested in them. That's how all the books, Joseph Henry Sharp, all the books on the various artists came out. So he was research and writing. Was the first one. The second one was amateur archaeology. And so if you look at those things, the authorship, some of that is inherent in his memoir, and a little bit of it's scraped into the poem, snuck into the poem. And the one that I thought was the most interesting, of course, was not only the amateur archaeology, but the recovery of all these Native American artifacts that he was finding at San Lazaro. Got the book. And then, of course, he was a pilot. And he was not only an Air Force pilot, but he became, he had his private, he was certified a private pilot. And so there were all those things about him. And then when he writes the poem and he describes the poem, he always says he constructed it like an architect. So there had to be some of that, but I didn't see any architectural underpinnings for him. I think he just used the word as a way to describe how he had engineered the poem. But there was one thing, aside from this passion for collecting, there was one thing that I realized that was, excuse me. Yeah, the funny thing is I got to do another show after this. So there was one thing that remained a significant part of Forrest Fenn from the time he was a child to the time he was an old man. He became an old man. I don't mean to speak about him in the past. And that was fishing. And very specifically, trout fishing, and even more specifically, trout fishing with flies, which is, as many fishermen know, a different kind of fishing. I can't imagine Fenn fishing with salmon eggs. That to him is probably I don't want to say beneath him, because I certainly teach, when I taught my children, I taught them how to fish with salmon eggs, because trying to teach somebody to fly fish is very difficult. So with that in mind, as I was eliminating all these sides, all these elements that together, that in a synchronous way put the entire Forrest Fenn together, the only one that had survived his entire life was the fishing thing. So I went back to the poem and started kind of looking at it from the perspective, if I was a fisherman, how would I have written this poem? Or how would a fisherman have written this poem? And things started fitting. There's a lot of fishermen in it, waters and creeks and descriptions like this. And it struck me that maybe the poem so what you're always looking for is the context. And so is the poem written in the context of an architect? Is the poem written in the context of a fighter pilot or a pilot, period? Is the poem written in the context of an amateur archaeologist? Is the poem written in the context of an art gallery aficionado / owner? And it's real easy after a little bit to eliminate each one of those. It's not written in that context. It's written by an outdoorsman. And more specifically, I believe, these are all my opinions, by the way, I believe it is written by an outdoorsman who has a passion for trout fishing with a fly rod. And then pieces started kind of getting closer and closer to me. So I came to the conclusion that the home of Brown refers to, that the capitalized B in the poem refers to brown trout. And again, you can argue with me. The advantage, again, so one of the defenses of my selection of warm waters from the New Mexico fishing regulations is I can cite the 2010 fishing regulations. I can cite the definition of, quote, warm waters, unquote, in the 2010 New Mexico State fishing regulations. And because of that, I can further cite precise locations at which warm waters halt, okay? So I've got that. I've got that. You can believe it or not, but I believe that if you believe that warm waters are defined in the New Mexico State fishing regulations, you've got the benefit of knowing you have a precise location. Might not be the same precise location as mine or anybody else's, but if you ask anybody else if they can tell you the precise location of their warm waters halt, they have neither a citation nor can they tell you precisely. If it's in some transition from steaming hot springs to cold springs, exactly where did the warm waters halt, etc. So I can make that argument. That's not my intent tonight. But it's my show, so I can say what I want. So that was how I felt about Brown. And so if I was going along this context of fishing, right, as the context for the poem, then it became rational that the home of Brown, the capital B in the home of Brown, referred to brown trout. And the problem with it is that if you look at how it's used in the poem and that you look at classic English style, how English is written, it didn't fit. You wouldn't capitalize it there. The only time you'd capitalize it was if it was referring to a person as a name, and then it would be a proper noun, and then according to English style and capitalization, it would be capitalized. So I needed to figure out why it was capitalized if it was brown trout. Because if it was capitalized in brown trout, I stuck to the rules of English style capitalization, then it didn't work. But then, as I continued my research back in probably October or November, over the winter of 2016, and again before Shelley had suggested the idea that we restart A Gypsy's Kiss, I found a document. You know what? Hang on just a second. I'm going to switch over to the desktop here. Let me see if I can do this without messing things up here. Okay. So that's you guys talking. So it's called, and you should see it pop up, AFS. There it is, the AFS Style Guide. And AFS stands for the American Fisheries Society. And the American Fisheries, in every discipline, whether it's engineering or science or mathematics or whatever, in every scholastic or academic discipline, where experts, professionals, have to agree on not only terminology, but on the taxonomy of that terminology. There's one organization that's made responsible for developing a basic set, a taxonomy and terminology that the rest of the professionals in the organization could accept and work with. Well, when it comes to what are referred to as inland fisheries, that means places inside the continental United States, Alaska and Hawaii, where you can find freshwater fish. And that's what the American Fisheries Society is all. I don't know if it necessarily has to be freshwater, but in waters governed by the United States regulations and state regulations. The American Fisheries Society is the professional organization who everybody agreed would be responsible for developing the terminology and the taxonomy. And that terminology and taxonomy is embedded in this guide right here. So I'm going to make a transition over here because I'm going to go to full screen Google thing here, right? So that's the page for the American Fisheries Society. It's a fisheries.org, books and journals, writing tools, style guide. And you can download the full style guide. Let me do that real quick so I can open it. And let me pop it open real quick. So what you're going to find in the full style guide is how they name fish, basically. And the instructions for all the other professionals who deal with inland fisheries, the management, the growth, the expansion, the use of inland, the regulation of inland fisheries. Everybody has to use this style manual. And I'm just going to scroll down. Now, you can read the entire style manual if you really like fish. But what you want to get to is Chapter 9. And Chapter 9 deals with species names. And I'm not going to read it to you. Go look for it yourself. Download it. Let me switch back to me. So Chapter 9 in the full style guide of the American Fisheries Society explains why the word brown in the poem refers to brown trout. And why if it refers, let me do that again. Why it is capitalized and therefore has the potential to refer to brown trout. And since by that time I had come to the conclusion that the context for the poem was fishing, then it made sense to me. And I had a citation. I wasn't making it up. I wasn't saying it was brown trout and didn't have evidence that you could capitalize it. And that evidence was different because if someone were to make an argument that if the context wasn't fishing and if it was just brown trout, then why was it capitalized? Because in terms of English style and punctuation, it would not be capitalized if it was just brown trout. It would only be capitalized if it was the proper name of an individual. Except that. That's what the American Fisheries Society and all the people who are responsible for managing the freshwater fisheries inside the United States decided upon. So that's why I think it refers to brown trout. Okay, wow, hey. So you guys are getting some really cool stuff tonight that you probably haven't heard me talk about before. Okay, so I got one more question here and then we can open up the lines. Let's see. Hey, Toby, this is Dan in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Do you think there is a trick to understanding the poem that nobody has figured out yet? Well, Dan, you may have already heard it, and that is no one's going to figure out this poem until they determine a context in which the poem was written. We have decided the context is trout fishing. But that doesn't make it right. We don't have the treasure. We're not going to look for the treasure anymore. If I was certain that was correct, I would tell you that we are going to look for the treasure one more time because we know where it is, right? But the trick is it all becomes much more clear to almost anyone as soon as you can determine exactly what the context of that poem is. I remember one time we did a show, and it was just the most adorable thing, because somebody used the show. Oh, the crappie isn't the crappie, it's the crappie. I remember we did a show once, and the title of the show was something about the poem, and the context is sex. And Shelley had taken the poem, and each one of the lines from begin at where warm waters halt down to look quickly down your quest to cease, and she had literally translated into sexual connotations, and without being lewd or vulgar. And it was just adorable because it actually fit pretty well. So the answer to your question, Dan, is when you can figure out the context in which Fenn wrote that poem, you'll figure out the poem. Okay? Okay, that is the last inbound question. Let me see. Let me go through the... All right. So again, it's hard for me. You guys go ahead and enjoy your evening talking to one another. I can't see the questions. Okay. All right. So I missed. Hey, Michael, good to be back. Thank you. Yeah, I'm still chasing the trout. Okay, well, one more question. It's from Mary Green, our friend. Nice to see you back. Question, if you happen to run across something that says, wow, maybe I should go look again. The treasure chest might be there. Would you? That's a good question. It would have to be, Mary, it would have to be so wow, I believe, that it would have to be wow enough to convince my partners that I was taking them to the place where the treasure sat. That's how wow it would have to be. And I haven't seen that wow. What I'm not going to do is I'm going to go back up to the Rio de los Pinos. I'm going to go up there, and hopefully Kevin and Shelley go with me, but I'm not going to look for treasure. I'm going right after the spring runoff, and I'm going to go catch some trout, some brown trout, because I missed that part of it this year. And it's such a beautiful place to fish. It's very different from... So I grew up fishing on the Pecos and the Rio Grande between Santa Fe and Taos. And that was a point at which they were very underfished. Our limit back then was 12 trout. Now they're overfished, they're overpopulated, the people that do fish there generally do not respect nature in the way that it needs to be respected to be able to make it last a long time for generations that follow us. But up in the Rio de los Pinos, it's still like that. It's primitive, so you're not going to get a lot of people. It's hard to get a camp or two. You know, the most that you can do is camp in a tent. There's no facilities. It's primitive, and it's beautiful fishing literally around every bend. When the waters aren't as low as they were for our last visit there. So I'm going to go back to the Rio de los Pinos. I wouldn't ask them to go back with me if it wasn't some form of vacation, so that I didn't torture them with a treasure, or that I knew precisely based on this new information that you suggest could come, Mary. I wouldn't invite them back to me to go treasure hunting without knowing precisely where the treasure was, and that would take some sort of, I don't know, some kind of insightful moment that occurred when I wasn't thinking about it. So, if I really, I think it would be foolish for me to negate the possibility that if I suddenly realized where I had gone wrong all this time and I knew precisely where the treasure was, but I'd say to myself, let it, meh, it's just a treasure. If I knew where that treasure was, if I was confident I knew where that treasure was. To the extent that I could tell my partners, let's go get the treasure, you bet your sweet bippy I would go get that treasure. But I don't. I haven't had that wow moment, Mary. Okay, so we have about another 15 minutes or so. Oops, Joel Lewicki. From Joel Lewicki in Minnesota, you answered what Brown might be, but not the home of. What about the home of Brown? Joel in Minnesota. The home of Brown would be a place in which brown trout would reside. And he's already told us where he looks for brown trout. He looks for them along the streams where the stream enters a curve, and in the outside where the water is deeper and where the grasses grow, and where the green grasses grow underwater. And I've seen those places, and I've caught trout in those places. Not in the Rio de los Pinos, but I can catch trout in the Cimarron and the Rio Grande and the Pecos and several other rivers in the San Juan. And I know where to catch brown trout because I know where brown trout reside. And to me, that's the home of brown. Okay, let's open up the phone lines and see who calls in. Let's see. Pow. All right. Phone lines are open. 866-597-9901. Call in for the Fenn Radio Show. We're going to do this. So, let's see. Yeah, see, Eric Schmidt, that's right. So, yeah, I don't know necessarily that I'm in the chase indulgence. I think I can say that I'm not necessarily in the chase, but I am necessarily interested in staying in contact with my friends. And I have 3,600, and as of this afternoon, 3,627 friends is the way I see it. And I want to stay in touch with them. And if I can do it as simply as getting on the air on the internet twice a week to have a conversation like this, then I'm going to do that. I think it could be. It's very satisfying. Shelley and I have had several of these conversations, and her bottom line basically is, does it make you happy? Right? And the answer to that is, yeah, it makes me happy. It does make me happy to be able to talk to you guys. Okay, so I didn't see Kyle Lasers come into the room. Oh, there he is right there. It's my friend Kyle Lasers. Welcome to the show. Okay, so unless I have a call, or unless there's some other questions that you can text to me. Let's see. Let me go through this. It looks like you guys are just chatting away as usual. Then I will sign off. Oh, there's Michael. Here's Michael. Here's Michael. Here's your entry theme. Your entrance theme. I picked that especially for you, Michael. Oh, got a question. Taking a call. Let me make sure that I switch it over here. And caller, this is Toby Eunice. Thanks for calling. The only thing I'm going to ask is that you turn down the volume on your computer so we don't get feedback.
Okay. Hi, this is Mike trying Skype from Japan.
Hey, Mike.
I don't really have anything particular to ask other than just trying to Skype out. But I figure since I'm here, I'll ask a question.
Michael, is this you, Michael? Is this Michael? Michael?
Huh?
Is this you?
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Me.
Oh, are you calling?
Yeah.
Are you Skyping from? Are you Skyping from Tokyo?
Yes, this is from Tokyo.
How much fun is that, Michael? Nice to.
From Australia.
All right.
What's
Well, you go ahead and talk. We have to do it like we do in the Army, where we can't talk over each other. So just I'll listen to you first, and then you listen to me.
Okay. Yes, there's quite a bit of lag, I've noticed. So my question for you then, Toby, is if the treasure happens to be found, let's say in New Mexico would you, even though you now declare yourself out of the chase, still be interested in documenting?
Tell me what you mean by documenting. Tell me what you mean by, because there's various levels of documentation. One is a post-discovery interview with the finder, et cetera, et cetera. But documenting could be as much as going out in the field and shooting the finder, now knowing where the treasure is discovered. Tell me how you would describe documenting.
Well, this is what I had in mind, like going out into the field, doing all the hard labor, getting to the spot, capturing on film using the drones where the thing was, trying to come to an understanding of what the solution was.
So that falls, I think, Michael, so the answer is yes, but let me explain it, because I think that goes, so Shelley knows how much equipment, filmmaking equipment I own. And up to and including drones and gimbals, and I think I own 3 gimbals and cameras, et cetera, and audio recording equipment. So I think in that situation, I could qualify it by saying, A, as long as it didn't interfere with our commitment to our other channel, and B, as long as it fit in with my avocation, my hobby of filmmaking, because like I said, I have all that equipment. There's literally a closet full of filmmaking equipment in the room on the other side of me. And so I think if those two conditions existed, if it gave me the opportunity to create a reasonable documentary, doesn't have to be a long one, it just has to be a reasonable quality, and interesting, and it didn't interfere with the development of Lady and the Oracle, yes, I think I would.
Okay. Well, a bit of advice then, if that ever happens, get the finder to carry all your equipment for you, because if they can carry the treasure map from wherever that spot is, they should be able to deal with your equipment.
Well, I'll tell you what, I have to admit to you that from the time I started this back in the late 70s, and as I made the transition from analog equipment, first photography, then filmmaking, to digital equipment, the video cassette recording onto, in the 90s, where we finally got to digital recording onto cards, etc. The amount of equipment that is required to make a reasonable film has diminished to the size of a medium-sized backpack, and I can produce a film today with equipment that would fit in a backpack with the same level of quality. No. I'm going to say exceeding the quality of films that I would have produced, say, in the mid-2000s. And the reason is I can now hold the camera in my hand that shoots 4K and has a battery time of 12 hours and a lens that's miraculous. So I'm still spunky enough to carry my own equipment, but that's because the equipment has diminished in size by an order of magnitude. So just give me some advance warning of when you're coming to recover the treasure, and I'll start putting together an outline for the recovery, an outline for the script. Okay. Okay.
Sounds good. If I ever happen to be lucky enough to find it, I will call you.
I hope so. And of course, should you and or Helena ever find yourself back in New Mexico, please contact us so that we can get together for at least a meal, and maybe a meal and some cocktails, okay? We look forward to seeing you both.
Absolutely.
All right, so
okay,
give her our love.
Will do. Bye.
Bye. So, Michael Houle calling us via Skype. Didn't know that worked that way, from Tokyo, Japan. So it's probably, let's see, I think it's 8 to 10 in the morning over there. So it's not like poor Jono, who has to be up at night in order to do this. So hang on, I did get a couple of messages while Michael and I were talking. Um, so this is from Vicky in Kentucky. It says, "What's your option?" Oh, Vicky. You've got Fenn Radio. I'm trying to come up with a name for this. Hi, Christy.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing real good, and you?
I'm good now. We got a great surprise tonight. It's like Christmas came early.
What's that?
You on the air.
Oh, I see. Well, it was serendipitous. It was spur of the moment. I thought about it all week. Jason, of course, had gotten sick, so I knew he wasn't going to be able to do a panel, but I didn't want to leave us in the lurch of not doing anything on a Wednesday night, so I decided to go ahead with this. So, and I kind of like it.
Love it.
I'm sure you know.
Yeah, we
how much
kind of like you.
you know how much I enjoy it, so I'm glad that everybody will at least tolerate me for a while longer. So, what are you up to?
Well,
you've been pretty quiet recently, other than your show on Monday. What have you been up to?
Well, I'm crawling out of maps, so we're gonna. Mike's actually holding a show tomorrow night, so we're gonna talk a little bit about the maps. Some people are wanting to know if they can get them by Christmas, and I think the answer is going to be yes. But I'm going to let Mike. I don't want to scoop Mike, so right. Mike and I have been talking maps, lots and lots of maps. So, and let's see. On the show, I announced. My search partner and I have parted ways, and he's gotten a new search partner, and he's staying in his spot. So I have a new search partner, but I'm not. I think my last search partner we figured out probably not going to go public yet on search partner and who they are. But heading north is all I will say. And then I don't know, because I know you're a poker guy. Mike and I are planning the World Series of Fenn. Probably late January, February in Vegas, and having a bunch of Fenn searchers and maybe some items to win, kind of like a Fenbury, but it's going to be in Vegas. So we're staying busy.
Well, that would certainly be worth a trip again to see friends. My only issue is that my children and I have decided that I'd be heading to the East Coast for my birthday on January 17th, because it's my 70th, and they thought that it would be nice if we could have that birthday where the majority of my children were actually going to celebrate it twice, once here in New Mexico, but all the East Coast children were going to be in that area, in the D.C. area at that time. So if it's any time after that, I'd look forward to a visit to Las Vegas for poker game. Although I heard Mike was planning it in one of the casinos.
Yep, because then it'll be all legitimate. Then he won't have an excuse. He's saying that's the reason he didn't win the last one is because he had to deal. We'll take that as a good excuse. Yeah. And so, at least one of the casinos has said, they could accommodate it, and they could make it. Then it's totally impartial, and they would run the money portion, so you buy in and there's pots and things, but we would worry about like the prizes, and we'd make it Fenny, as someone has said. Yeah,
Fenny. I wonder where that came from. Well, it sounds like a lot of fun, and it would be worth the travel. Vegas is a nice place to visit during the winter months. Inexpensive place to visit, both from airline flights and hotels, so it wouldn't be a great expense. And it's not that far, actually. I could probably. It's an 8-hour drive from here in Albuquerque, so it's even a short drive.
Yeah, and there's direct flights everywhere, so that's why, because we got in, I know because you were my first call, we got into a little bit of trouble on the last drawings and all that, so we thought, what better place to have a poker tournament than Vegas, where it is legal to do almost everything, and whatever goes to Vegas stays in Vegas.
Exactly, which is how we like it. That, as I understood it, resolved itself, right? The what we had talked about in terms of what the state was doing, it wasn't anywhere near an investigation. It was simply a confirmation that...
Well, it was officially an investigation, and all the questions were answered that were inquired. I think basically exactly what you said, be open and honest and let them answer whatever they ask, because all of our intents were pure and all of that. So I will say Mike really took the lead on, Mike, he could he's an honest guy.
Yeah, he
so
is. Yeah.
It was probably I was more concerned because once they realized we were just trying to help someone out, this wasn't a scheme and all of that, then, it was pretty smooth sailing from there. But there was, there was a little bit of time that it was a little, I won't say dicey. It was just the unknown because they were collecting data. So once they collected the data and saw that, oh my goodness, this was just and they actually said to us, if you do one of these again, you all did a good thing. We'll show you which form to fill out and which permit to pull, and it's real easy. Just do it next time. So they were so nice and left us their contact information, and they knew we did something pretty special, and that was pretty cool.
Well, I think when you mentioned that in the email that they sent Mike, they mentioned policies and procedures, which is very different from laws and regulations. If the laws and regulations had come up then, that's what they were doing. But when they said policies and procedures, you were at the worst going to get the suggestion that the next time you do this, you make sure you contact us first, because there was no.
Yeah, I think once we were able to say, like, did any money come out for your time or this, that? Not one penny. Yeah. And I think that, for me at least, that was, I think, the tipping point of we could actually show that we had quite a bit of expense out, and there was not even a dollar taken out of that. It was given wholly to Jamie. So I think that was the turning point. Yeah.
There were two requirements that they would have had. One was it a profit-making enterprise, and was there criminal intent? Neither of those cases were true. So I'm not surprised it went over. Yeah. I'm kind of glad that they did it. Should that we ever do that again, we'll know exactly how to handle it. So.
Yes. Well, So all that, and that's where we were a little. We did the show to say here was the couple of reasons we were kind of quiet, but now we're back, and now you're back, and Mike's now doing things. It doesn't even feel like the off season anymore.
No, and I think that was one of the other things too. Is the off season is always a time for of conversation, right? To talk about the things that we've learned in the past season, and what makes it different for us the next season. If there's going to be a next season, like I said, I don't expect that. Mary Green's question was very interesting for me, because it asked the question, if I knew where the treasure was, would I go get it? And the answer is yes, if I did, but I don't. And we admitted that when we did our show of a couple of weeks ago. We just don't, we put a lot of effort into it, and we don't know what the treasure is, but at the same time, I don't think that validates any reasoning for me not staying in touch with the people that expect at least a conversation from us, and that's what we're going to try and do. We're going to continue the conversation. So.
Yeah, I think Shelley said in chat, as long as it's fun, keep doing it. It's fun.
Yeah, and that was kind of, we had another one of the conversations, because I was questioning my whether I should actually do tonight's show. One was I wasn't sure that my voice could tolerate it because of the cold, but the other was whether or not I was doing the right thing. Am I just kind of slowly getting back into this, et cetera, et cetera? And so the conversation we had is, what were the things that I enjoyed about it most? And the things were the utilization of all this technology that we acquired, the approach to doing different things on YouTube, which we can always apply to our new channel, and the conversations like these with friends who I've acquired over the years. And that's what was fun about it. Is it fun necessarily, beating yourself to death after you spend a week out looking for the treasure and you haven't come up, you're no further along? That's hard. But we're not going to do that anymore.
Yep. Yep.
I'm just not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to do it unless, in answer to Mary Green's question, that I know exactly that I know so exactly where the treasure is that I can tell my partners we're going to get the treasure. Until that time comes, then I'm not going to do it.
You never know. We're going to go through some maps, and maybe we'll find a big old X in your location now that we know kind of general area, and we might be running for it. It might be a foot race. You never know, Toby. I hope that would be enough, and we'd start running.
I imagine that if I hear from Mike and he says, I have a very special map of New Mexico for you, and it will cost you $1,000, then I know why he's calling, right? So Shelley just sent.
Okay,
Yeah.
Mike's got some explaining to do if he does that with you.
Yeah. So Shelley just sent me Shelley just sent me a message saying I've misspelled Wednesday in the crawl. So Shelley is
somebody noted that earlier.
Oh,
That's
nice.
Small stuff.
Small stuff.
Welcome back. Thanks for chatting with me.
It's good to be back, and thanks for calling. We look forward to future conversations just like this one.
Yep. Okay, good night.
Bye-bye. So I'm going to end this and accept another call from someone. Hi, you've reached Toby Eunice. Make sure you turn your audio on your computer off. Otherwise, we're all listening to that.
I can't hear.
I know, because you have your computer on. Turn your computer off. There you go.
Okay.
Okay, how's that? That better?
Yes, a lot better.
So who's this and where are you calling from?
This is Vicki Cole. I'm calling from
Kentucky.
Louisville, Kentucky.
Louisville.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Hi, Vicki. I got your text message, but I wasn't sure I understood it completely. I'm hoping that you're calling to clarify.
Yes. It was opinion. I was dealing with Chloe, and I was typing and getting her in better there.
How is Chloe?
So, she's doing good.
Yeah?
She's in school, and
we're
good. Just, doing the normal thing.
So, for those of you that don't remember, Chloe was the little blonde girl, the adorable little blonde girl that was at Fenn the night that we went up to for the inside Fenn at the Hyatt in Santa Fe. And she was just adorable. So
she's getting sassy now.
Oh, well, don't they all at some point or the other?
But my question was, what's your opinion of the statement that was stated, look at the big picture?
So that's very much in line. So, taking Fenn statements, in my opinion, for every Fenn statement on one side, on one side of the balance, there is one or more statements on the other side of the balance. Right? Simplify. Look at the big. How do you simplify and look at the big picture? So the big picture for me, and I'm going to get back to a response that or a comment that I made earlier in the program, and that is the big picture for me is the context. What is the context for that poem? And I think when he refers to the big picture, that's his way of telling us to look at the context. Imagine what the context for his writing that poem was. And when he uses terms like that, like look at the big picture, simplify, etc., I think that's what he's telling us, because I think until you do that, I think it was Michael, the gentleman that I just spoke to, Michael Hoole, it was either he or Jono Jones that suggested taking each of the clues and turning them into a hint for a crossword puzzle. And which I thought was a brilliant idea, honestly. I haven't tried it yet, but imagine if begin at where warm waters halt was a crossword puzzle hint, right, for something of 7 across, whatever it was, and start looking at it from that perspective. And here's what, when they said that, I didn't have a real good, what came to me almost immediately when they said that was not that I should be looking at crossword puzzles. What came to me was every crossword puzzle that anyone does has a context for it, right? So you don't get a bunch of lists of crosses and downs without having an understanding of what this crossword puzzle is about. So it could be about presidential politics, right? But it has a context. And so when Fenn tells us to look at the big picture like that, I think what he's telling us to do is look at the context. And once you understand the context of that poem, whether in my case it's trout fishing, whether in your case it's archaeology, whether in someone else's case it's geology, whatever the context you believe it to be, I think that's when the pieces start falling into place.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
Is that fair? Big picture?
Okay.
That's a good big picture is...
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out. I was like, what does he mean by that?
Yeah. Look up the definition. Context is a often used word without, and I think everybody has a good sense of what when you use the word context, you mean. But look up the definition.
Yeah.
The definition of context explains kind of what the big picture is.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you. And I'm glad you're back.
Well, I never kind of left, but I had to deal with the cold. And tell Chloe I said hi.
I sure will.
Thank you. You have a good evening.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye. Okay, so I have one more question. I'm going to turn the phone off for right now because I have got to get going because I have another program to do on our other channel. So I'm going to turn the phone off. And let me see if I can answer this question real quick. It's Cheryl from Southern California. She says, where is the waterfall in Vietnam? So Cheryl, if I remember correctly, he saw it somewhere in the Mekong Delta. And the problem with Vietnam is that it has 4 seasons, 2 of which are wet and 2 are which are dry. And when they're wet, because of the rains, there's waterfalls literally around every bend. There are short waterfalls, there are tall waterfalls. As he describes the waterfall, he describes it coming off a tall mountain, right? That it was a significant waterfall. And there are places mostly along the Thai and Laotian border where there are mountainous areas. But if I remember correctly, his time was spent in the Mekong Delta, because he mentions Binh Tui, which is right around the major city in the Delta called Can Tho. So there are areas in the Mekong Delta in South Vietnam, what is now Vietnam, but what was then the Republic of Vietnam, that are mountainous where a waterfall could have been seen. But it is more likely that it will be seen during the wet seasons rather than the dry seasons. So it's very seasonal. When it's wet, when the monsoons come, they come twice a year, they're 3 months long, and everything is sopping wet. When the dry seasons are there, the mud that you were driving through before that turns into mush, and then it dries up, and the more you drive through it, it becomes this powdery dust that splashes. So when it gets dry, it's very, very dry. Now, the area that I was operational in was along the western edge of the Mekong Delta, and there was a set of mountains called the Seven Sisters. And yeah, I think if you were to look on a map for the Seven Sisters on the west side of the Mekong Delta in RVN, you might be able to find the kinds of mountains that you would look for. And what's interesting is if you do this on Google Earth and start looking at the pictures that people have posted to it, you start seeing some of those waterfalls. But finding a waterfall from one season, the waterfalls in the dry season may not be there. The waterfalls in the monsoon season could be literally around every corner. So I think that's the hard part about it. It's not like they're not persistent waterfalls like they are here in the U.S., where we have more, leveled out seasons. Okay, I am going to say I've got to get on here because I've got another program to do at 9 o'clock, and I need to make a bunch of changes. I still have 45 minutes. All right, so. I will be back on Friday night for a 2-hour program. I'm not going to call it the Fandango anymore. I'm just going to call it the Fenn radio show, Forest Fenn Radio, Fenn Treasure radio show, whatever. I'll think of something. But I will be back on Friday night, and then on Wednesday nights, either I'll come back or there will be a panel session as hosted by my son Jason, because that falls into that category of it's going to take time to plan a panel session, and he did have one planned, but he got baby Everly's cold through me, so there we are. Okay, thanks for joining me tonight. It was good to see all of you again. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I look forward to seeing you again. Do I have a new outro, or is that the... Let me see. That's the older outro. And I look forward to seeing you guys again on Friday night, and until then, you can send text messages to 866-597-9901. I haven't memorized the number yet. That's why I have to keep looking at it. So you can send text messages with your questions, and I'll get to them on Friday night. Or you can leave voicemails with your questions, and I'll play them on Friday night and answer them. And then, of course, we'll open up the phone lines again to see if we can deal with some more questions. And maybe I'll share some more of my, I don't know, they're not exactly secrets. They're just things that we haven't talked about before. So, all right. Let me see what else. I think that's it for tonight. So thanks for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you on Friday. Happy Wednesday, happy Thursday, happy Friday, and we'll see you Friday night at 7 o'clock Mountain Time. Okay? Thanks, you guys.